We're
live.
Oh, we're live? Look at this. We're streaming on Facebook. Who would have thought? Here we are. All right. So while we wait for everybody to tune in here, we were just kind of getting our ducks in a row. Yeah, we have an action-packed live stream here today. So what we want to talk about today is something called the pre-offer addendum. All right, and the pre-offer addendum is designed to keep us out of trouble. It's designed to keep clarity for all parties involved, clarity for the sellers, buyers, whomever you're working with, we're keeping clarity. So where this thing began was a couple of years ago. We were, myself and Greg were at a conference and we were watching, I think he was the CEO of Southwest Airlines. And he was talking to us about, you know, all the ups and downs of the flight industry and all these types of things. And he said, you know, one of the things that actually helped flight become normalized and helped consumers to feel comfortable flying was safety records, right? And so they knew that was going to be a difficult thing for them if they had, you know, if 1 out of 10 planes went down, it'd be a big problem for traveling via airplanes. So they realized that a lot of the mistakes that were causing flights to go down were because of simple mistakes, human error. And so they discovered they created a checklist that every single pilot has to go through before they take off. So every single time that we've all flown, there's been someone up in the cabin doing a checklist. Boom, 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 boom. And it took the safety levels of flight through the roof. And so many lives were saved, disasters averted. And so Greg was like, you know what? So many of these things that we get into, so many of the spats we see in real estate are because of lack of clarification, a lack of transparency. So let's bring tons of transparency to the table. Let's make sure everybody's on the same page. So that's where we have this pre-offer addendum created. And if you haven't seen it, you can check it out. It's inside of your loops. We're updating it right now. We're making a newer, more improved version. So that one's going to be coming out in the next day or two. So just know that the one that we have will be getting updated, but I'm going to pass the reins to the rest of the team here, and we can run through this thing practically, and we can share some ways that it's helped us all avoid issues. So Kim, why don't you start and give us your impression of this checklist?
Okay. And so one thing I just noticed over in the files, we do have the current one there. It's called FSRE pre-offer addendum. So
and that's over at the 5-Star Connect files section.
Yes, right here in the classroom. Yeah.
Classroom. Got it.
In the classroom. Yep. So it is there. And then we are updating it because many of you have asked about the appraisal guarantee. So as Paul said, it's to keep us safe. It's a protection for 5-Star, for your client, for all of us, so that we're all on the same page. I know times when I've worked with a first-time home buyer, and here's what I always tell new agents when you're first getting the business. When I work with a first-time home buyer, you kind of assume they understand, say, earnest money. And then when it's time to, you get all excited, you finally win an offer, and you're like, all right, well, we need the $5,000 earnest money. And they look at you like, you mean I can't finance that? So that's where this is really good for new agents, because it's the bullet points of the contract. So it will also help you when you're explaining it, it helps you to make sure everybody's understanding it. Mm-hmm. So I personally use it on every transaction, especially right now with all the waivers of inspections, not getting, giving an appraisal gap, et cetera. Right. So
yeah, and guys, in this marketplace, with how intense things are, I'm going to give you a real life example of what Kim just kind of described can happen here if you don't have transparency. We just got a nice 4-page letter from someone from the public, a complaint. They bought a home, they waived inspections. And they said, we were told this is the only way that we could win this thing. We were told that everyone's doing it, And now we move in here and there's a laundry list of repairs the house needs. Now they did win the listing. They won it. They won the house, but the house has some issues. But the realtor did everything right. The realtor explained, look, if you want to win, here's what you have to do. This is what we're up against. Here's what we're seeing in the marketplace. Here's what competing offers are looking like. But the home buyer it wasn't made clear that this wasn't a requirement to waive inspections. It was if you want to win, this is what you probably need to do, but I need you to be aware of the risks and enter in the pre-flight addendum.
Right.
And and in this scenario, there was not a pre-flight addendum signed.
Right.
So it left room for that buyer to have that, like, was I represented properly? Did my realtor do something wrong? But sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's good. And so there's 4 different parts, and I always say this, it's one thing on the day you want to win, we agree to all kinds of things, but it's another thing. So say we give them 30 days possession, we don't ask for any money up front. We're like, yep, that's all great because we want to win on the day that we have an offer. But fast forward 30 or 45 days later, and you walk in and there's holes in the walls or the door is broken, then it's a different story. So this form will help protect you with that and make sure everybody understands what they're signing. So to start, there's 4 different parts to this form. It covers financial contingencies, property related contingencies, possession, and then there's a final hold harmless. So the first one is on financing. And that is just simply, do we want to read through every line or just kind of paraphrase them, Paul?
Let's see, maybe give us a quick read real quick.
Okay, so the first one is there's 3 parts to the financing related contingencies. Upon the execution of a purchase agreement, the buyer will immediately provide 5-star and earnest money deposit made out to 5-star real estate in the amount of $5,000, whatever you want to fill in. Unless the purchase agreement states otherwise, the agent will immediately deliver the check to 5-star to be deposited by the broker. The broker will deposit the check within 2 banking days or within the number of banking days stated on the purchase agreement. So that's simply just saying that they understand that there is an earnest money and I will need to collect that within 48 hours or whatever you write into the contract.
Good.
So that one's kind of simple. Doug or Tracy, have anything you want to add to that?
No, I know when I explain a purchase agreement to someone, I know that's a question, when do I make out the check? How long do I have to get the check to you? That kind of thing.
And when will it leave my account? When will the money be pulled?
Exactly. All those upfront questions. And so this covers it. And again, it's really straightforward that it'll support what you've said to, in this case, to your buyer.
Yeah, and it's really important that they understand we need to collect it immediately because then 5-star has 48 hours upon receiving it to get it to the bank. So, so that's number 1. And then number 2, a question that I always ask. So your buyer's all excited. They have a pre-approval. So they have a couple other questions that I want to ask them. And one is, do you have money, A, for the earnest money and B, for closing costs? And sometimes like you go, what does that mean? Right? Like, what does that mean? What are those? So this form prompts a lot of conversations that will create clarity, right? So, oops, sorry, lost light. So this one simply says buyer requests, and it has either a percentage or a dollar amount of the sales. So either a percentage of the sales price or say $5,000 paid by the seller to be credited to the buyer toward buyer's closing costs and prepaid fees necessary to close the transaction.
And
so
this one,
yeah, go ahead.
This one is big. By the way, it's going to be very hard to get an offer put through with any of that money written in there. So just so you guys know, it's going to be difficult. But in the past, this was very common. Kim, there was a time in 2010, 11, 12, where probably 80% of offers were having money going from the seller to the buyer to help cover closing costs all the time. Banks were like, hey man, ask for 3%, ask for 3%, ask for 3%, ask for 3%. Now here's where this is a big deal, because sometimes when your client goes to the lender, gets pre-approved, they don't really mention closing costs at all to you. And so you're like, oh good, you're just a regular old buyer that just can write a good solid offer. And then all of a sudden you write the offer, you get the offer accepted. And the lender goes, hey, so just wanted to confirm they got 3% for closing costs? And you're going, oh, say what?
Never talked about that, right?
And then you talk to the buyer, you're like, hey, I was unaware of this. We already have the offer signed. And they go, oh, my lender told me it was standard.
Yeah.
That was what lenders were saying. Oh, it's standard that you get 3% back. So what happens is, and this is what Kim brings up a great point. When you put this addendum in front of them, it forces them to go, wait a second, I remember my lender mentioning these costs. I think I need to get 3%. I think he mentioned 3%, or she. So it's another way to avoid that awkward conversation later on down the road.
Yep. So once again,
Kim, always is the term seller to pay or seller concessions. Isn't that the most confusing thing in the world? If you're a buyer, you're saying, well, so the seller's going to write me a check, right? Is that how this works? And again, you've got to go into more and more explanation as to how that works. But again, we in the industry sometimes take that for granted. But again, this is where those conversations up front with how this is going to work, and obviously listening to the lender right away. That's how that has to take place.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And many times they've been saving their money and they're like, I have my 5%, my 10%, my 20%. And they don't realize that that's just a small portion of the big picture. And so the breakdown of doing it this way helps us educate them in the ways that the lender failed to do so.
Yeah, yep, that's good. And then the last one that I'll cover is simply that you, as a buyer, that you agree to apply for a mortgage within X amount of days. So you've already got pre-approved, but once that contract is executed, then it's the buyer's responsibility to go to the lender or go online, however they practice, and formally make loan application.
Over at the
So we get to fill that in with the number of days. So simply says buyer agrees to apply for a mortgage within, say, 2 days of an accepted agreement. Buyer further agrees to make all efforts, this is really good actually, for full lending approval and would do nothing to impair their ability to gain full approval. Failure to meet these requirements may be a breach of contract and the earnest money deposit could be forfeited. So this is a good time to talk to them about, okay, I know that you're all excited about closing and you want to go get new appliances, but please don't, right? But please don't do that.
don't do anything, right?
Yep.
Right.
And if you have any questions, consult your lender, consult your lender, consult.
Yes.
your lender.
And one thing they don't realize is lenders also subscribe to this service that sends them alerts. So the moment you go under contract with a lender, okay, your social security number goes into a database that if you go to Pottery Barn and decide you're going to buy all this beautiful new furniture that's going to be delivered after you close, but you bought it on the credit card, right? And even though it hasn't been delivered, an alert has just now gone to your lender that says, hey, ding, 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 so-and-so just took out credit in excess of whatever, which may knock you out of your pre-approval. And this has happened to me before with a lender, so I know exactly what it looks like. And what we had to do to undo it, to lead the buyer back into a pre-approval was not easy.
I've heard stories of having to have appliances returned.
Yeah, yeah.
It
Mine
feels
was
like-
literally a Pottery Barn thing.
Was it? Yeah.
Yes.
So,
And-
Yep.
And what about the car that they bought because their car
Yeah.
failed? And so,
Yeah.
I mean, you hear all of those things. So,
Yeah.
hey guys, I talked to somebody yesterday, first year in the business. They said, how important is it to have that actual pre-approval go with my offer? What would you tell them?
It's as important as the signature on the bottom of the PA.
There you
Thank
go.
you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
and can we clarify, what's the difference between a pre-qualification and pre-approval? What's the difference?
There you go.
So the way I understand it, Kim, is most people are getting pre-qualifications, right?
Yep.
They're essentially just, based on paper, rough numbers, your
Credit score.
Credit score. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just taking your word for it. You're good.
Yep.
A
Yep.
pre-approval is when they actually pull your credit, they do the actual numbers, they do some verifications, and they get down to the point where they're very, very, very confident that they've done enough work on the back end that you're a shoo-in and you have a pre-approval.
Yep.
So that's the difference between a pre-qualification and pre-approval. And I will tell you right now that most of the time, people are using this language interchangeably.
Yes.
So you really don't know what you're looking at unless you ask a couple more questions.
Yeah,
Yep.
or call the lender to verify. Like
Yeah.
when you're on the seller side and you're representing the sellers, you should be calling these lenders and asking the question, hey, talk to me about your pre-approval letter. Have you done something more than check the credit score and ask them their income? Like, have we verified things?
Right. Did we get check stubs? Have we got the bank
Yep.
stubs?
Bank
One thing,
statements.
some of the lenders that I work with, they will actually call the listing agent if they know that I'm making an offer.
Mhm.
And that gives some credibility too. And they'll talk to them about how strong it is. And we have already, pulled bank statements. They're good to go. They're a strong buyer. So that's always helpful as well.
And if you don't have a lender that will do that for you, find a lender that will.
Find
Yeah.
a new lender.
Because when I will tell you right now that lenders can help make and break transactions.
They can.
Lenders can
Yep.
give you the confidence. If you've done 20 deals with a lender and you know that lender well, and that lender comes across as a PA and you see that lender's involved in the financing, you're going, I know this one's going to be good.
Yep. And it helps establish, many times when I've had my lenders call, it helps establish a relationship with the listing agent that says, hey, my buyer's agent, this is their go-to person. Like they have a relationship that's ongoing. I trust this, and not just some fly-by-night company. So that call and email, something is important.
Yep.
And I was just going to add, it's really important who you do lending with. We don't like that because it's so competitive in this market, but often if we have a local lender that we know does really good business and you're on the other side, you're trying to get your buyer through, they may tend to choose. I know as a listing agent, I want to look at who I know I've done business with, and I'm not partial, but I need to know it's not some bank out in Arizona somewhere. I need somebody who can walk into that can tell me how things are going, like a true face. So it does matter who you bank with.
And the other thing on a pre-approval letter, and I know we need to move on, but again, it's talking about the content of that pre-approval letter. Had an agent say to me yesterday, I want to make sure that people know how strong my buyer really is. So I put as much on that pre-approval letter as I possibly can. The interest rate they're going to secure, what they're qualified to borrow. Again, share with me, guys. Good idea? Not a good idea if you're representing a buyer? What's important?
You know what, Doug? I think it's great when someone said, if a lender can put a little extra statement on there that this is above and beyond the industry standard practice. That's really encouraging, because when you're a seller, you've got 35 offers here, 15 offers, 10 offers here. We've already pushed value to the absolute max. We've already pushed the terms of the absolute max. As a seller, you're getting amazing offers here. What matters next is which one is going to get to a closing. Which one is going to be the best bet? Which one is a slam dunk? Which one is going to be least headache? And then you start nitpicking between, well, let's look at their financing. Let's look at who they're working with. Let's look at all these things. So the decisions aren't always based upon, well, this one beat that offer by $1,000. No brainer. That's not always a decision being made. So I think that anything you can do to strengthen that offer, along with that pre-offer or that pre-approval, pre-qualification letter, whatever it is, just read the bottom of some of these pre-qualification letters, guys. These say like, all of this can change. I make no representation of anything on here. This is actually just completely made up.
Right. Basically. It might as well say that. Yeah.
Like it says, oh yeah, they're qualified for this, but just so you know, this could all change.
All that disclosing. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. They're covering themselves too, but
all right.
And I don't think it's a bad idea to have the buyers, sometimes just having the buyer's credit score on the pre-approval letter says, hey, like I have a buyer right now who could buy way more than he wants to. But that's one thing I should probably add to his letter too is, hey, we're only buying a $300,000 house, but he could buy 500. And oh, by the way, he has a credit score of 810, so it can't hurt.
Back in the day, people used to say, well, I don't want them to see my full approval value. I'm like, no, you want them to see that. You want them to know you're strong.
Yeah, in this market.
$500,000 doesn't mean they're going to ask you to pay $375 on a $225,000 house. They're not going to, that's not how it works. It's got to appraise and stuff. But I'd rather show as much strength as possible.
Good. Good.
So,
Tracy,
all right. What's the next one?
Yeah. So property related contingencies. So really the big piece of this one is going to be home inspection. So it says buyer has been advised by their agent to have as many inspections as possible. Purchase agreement shall be contingent upon the buyer's acceptance of inspection findings. 5-star especially recommends inspections, always recommend inspections, to determine if there is or has been water penetration in the basement or perhaps in water attic areas. Choice of inspector is buyer's decision, and buyers acknowledge that 5-star has not made any recommendations regarding buyer's choice of inspector. And I'll come back to that. 5-star and its agents have made no statements, verbal or written, regarding roofing, water in the basement, or grading issues. The parties agree that the broker and salespersons shall not be liable for errors or omissions made by said inspectors, repairmen, or other professionals. So at the end of the day, what that says to me is that you as your buyer's professional highly recommends and really sheds a lot of light on the area of inspections. I mean, we just spent a whole paragraph talking about why they're important. Okay. And at the end of the day, a buyer can choose not to have a home inspection, but however, an inspection is a contingency related to the eventual sale. So first we talked about the mortgage, that's a contingency, right? Now we're to the inspections, and there's all different kinds of inspections. But first and foremost, we recommend that the buyer does them. We recommend that, I will make choices. I'll say to my buyers, here's the name of some people I've worked with, and I always follow it with, you may know someone, you may have used someone in the past, your mom, your dad, your uncle, somebody may recommend someone to you, but it's their choice who they would like to use.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I'll often say that to the seller as well when I send the offer. Hey, we know lots of inspectors. We're putting 7 days in our offers now. We used to always do 10, and in some cases it used to be 14. But now we're having to shorten these time periods just up to 7 days in hopes that please pick me, right? Which is why some people are just waiving inspections, but nonetheless, do the inspections. We can't warrant anything beyond what we can see. We're not the professional. There's all different kinds of inspections that one might need to do. They might just be a normal home inspection. They could be a radon test, right? That's beyond a normal scope of a home inspection. They could be having a sewer camera done. If you're buying a house that was built before 1960, likely the type of plumbing that's used is not PVC, which we use today. So you have all the root problems, you have cracks in the lines. So you've got radon, you've got a regular home inspection, you've got a sewer camera inspection. It could be on a well and septic. You need special inspectors that come in to do that. Some home inspectors will do them, some won't. But you can see that there are a lot of areas that we want to shed light on too for our buyers, so they really know what they're buying, so that when they don't inspect, they understand the ramifications regarding that. So,
Yep.
Hey, Trace, this next paragraph is interesting regarding the boundary survey.
yeah,
Can I take this a minute?
yeah, go.
It says buyers may have been advised to obtain a boundary survey and purchase agreement shall be subject to the buyer's review and approval prior to, obviously we're putting in a date. It says buyer acknowledges that a boundary survey is the only option which may be considered a survey. Neither 5-Star nor its agents has made any statements, verbal or written, regarding survey issues, property boundary issues, easements, shared or deeded rights of way. And it's interesting the conversation that people have around that, right?
Yeah.
What's a survey? What's a mortgage survey? What's
Let me tell a story, Doug.
Say that again.
Let me tell a story. So one of the favorite things for like general public is like, well, I was on the GIS maps or I was on Zillow and I saw the boundary of the property. Right? They'll still do that a lot. But let me tell you about an actual story that I had. I had a client buying a brand new house. Okay, it was like a $550,000 new build. It was out in Ada, so it was like on a big chunk of land, and like you couldn't see anything because it was like a dirt road, and like it was all undeveloped. But he had a lot right here, and so we asked the developer. We said, "Hey, can you give us a copy of a site map and a survey?" So they send over this document that looks like, and it was part of the contract was they were going to give us this survey, and it's got like a stamp on it. Looks very official. Well, at first glance, we all thought it was a survey. And so we looked at it, we checked out the property, we thought it looked great. They loved the lot. They were gonna put a pool out back, a bunch of landscaping, and they were getting quotes for other landscaping. They bought it, we closed on it. They bought $100,000 of landscaping and put a pool in.
Wow.
Okay, so we're probably like 150 to 175 into this property now. Well, the same developer started building the house next door. And when they started clearing the land, they cleared 2/3 of their landscaping out with it.
Ooh.
Ouch.
And they said, whoa, that's our property. Yeah. And he said, no, here's a survey. Your house is right here. And so like, real quickly here, the initial site map we had showed this property centered on the lot. When we got a copy of this other survey, it showed the property at the very edge of the land in this awkward little spot on this piece of land. They never would have bought this house to begin with. So you ask the question like, okay, Paul, you've been a realtor since 2006. How could you possibly let this happen? We took for granted that we were working with one of the largest builders in Grand Rapids. And we thought, well, of course this is going to be accurate, but it wasn't a boundary survey. There were no stakes going in the ground. Okay. We looked at a drawing. and it showed the house placed here. We took their word for it. So what happened? Fast forward, what happened with all this? Well, lawyers got involved, and the brokerage ended up the builder ended up writing my clients a check for $25,000 in cash. And they took a huge chunk of the land from the neighboring property and gave it to the homeowners to fix the situation.
Wow.
And the truth was, the builder did screw up. They actually thought that was where the house was located on the property. But I'm just trying, I mean, so you can't trust anybody. And this is why we say boundary stakes are the only way to prove it.
Yep.
And when you say boundary stakes, guys, that's not a drawing. That is literally hammered things in the ground, flags, so you can physically see the boundary of the property.
Yep. And recommended obviously to get out to the property and make sure those are in place before you close. Yep.
Now, and guys, you know, to talk about this and the inspection thing we just talked about, we know, guys, that in competitive scenarios, there's going to be pressure to waive these things.
Yep.
And we know, and you know, as an agent, that you're going to have to waive some of these things sometimes, but it's always your client's decision. Your client, and you explain the risks, you explain the benefits, you let them make the final call. For example, if you're buying a house in the middle of a city, it might have very defined lines. If it all matches, if there's no fence on the line, or if there's no barn on the edge of the line, maybe your client might feel like, I can deal with this no matter if it's 6 inches that way or 6 inches this way.
Yeah, you're basically looking at mowing lines most of the time. You're like, well, I can see like he's mowing his grass right here. And I mean, that's kind of what you're looking like, because in 9 years, so I've been doing this for 9 years. Let me tell you about how many boundary surveys I've had done with a closing. Zero. I've had 0 boundary surveys done in 9 years. Number one, because they're expensive.
Right.
Number two, because people don't have the time to do it prior to closing. Number three, your offer is never going to get accepted if you choose a boundary survey, because no one else will have them.
Mhm.
And I think either Paul or Doug said something about, Doug, you said something about a mortgage survey.
Yes.
Many times I'll meet with people and they'll say, well, I'm going to get a survey with my closing. I mean, I've always gotten them. It's like, well, we haven't done that in probably 20 years, probably. And that was called a mortgage survey.
Or a sketch.
And that was just a sketch, really. It just kind of said, all right, well, here's the house and here. So it had no teeth in it. You couldn't put a fence in your yard with it. You couldn't do anything with it. But
Right. That's a big topic. I think we all could tell stories. I mean, sometimes I've sold properties where the garage is on the property line. So we'll, talk more about that in training, but it's something that is really important, and you can still get one. Even if you choose not to have one, your buyer can still pay themselves. And I always say, no matter where I'm at in the city, in the country, you know what? I always recommend you get a stake survey, because I need to cover, and tell them this is what I recommend. If you really want to know where your boundary lines are, you really need to get a survey.
And that's super great advice, especially if you're looking at this as, hey, what can I do to protect my buyer in this? Yeah.
One more reason, guys, why this is important, and maybe not even a stake survey for this one, but we always recommend a stake is the best. Okay.
Right.
But I had another client that bought this house, called me 6 months later. Hey, we had plans to put a pool in. News to me. Okay. News to me. Well, guess what? There's an easement for the power company going straight to the center of their backyard, which means they cannot dig a pool. There's other things at stake here. It's not just where the edge of the property goes. There's easements coming through the property sometimes for power lines, for drain lines, for whatever sort of municipal things are heading out here. There could be a drainage easement where your neighborhood has the back 25 feet of your land is a drainage easement. So you can't build anything there.
Or where's the septic system, right?
What's that?
Or where's the septic system?
Yep, all these types of things.
Yep.
So these are the things that you need to be aware of when you're advising your client whether or not they should get one, or whether or not they should take the chance and not get one. Ultimately, it's their choice. But if you hear things like, we want to put a pool in, we want to do these types of things, then you really need to get a survey done.
Right, exactly. Because in your title work, it's going to show those deficiencies of the easements coming, that they're attached to the property, because almost every single piece of property has an
Yeah,
easement
they're
for
everywhere.
utility.
Easements are all over the
They're
place.
everywhere, but we don't know where the location of those are,
Yeah.
right? We don't know where the water line cuts across the backyard or the front yard or whatever. So
Yep.
yeah, good thought, good thought.
Probably the most common thing I talk to buyers about, and they talk about putting up a fence. Well, eventually I want to put up a fence.
Mhm.
So, you know, whether I get a mortgage survey or whether I get a boundary survey right now, it really doesn't matter, because Doug, when I do finally put that fence in, then I'll get a stake survey just verifying where my property lines are. And of course, in a good conversation up front as the agent protecting them, you're going to say things like, well, why don't we do that now? Let's do that now so that we can verify that, so we don't even run a risk of that happening. So
Yep, yep.
anyways.
All right, well, then we go on to star title. So we kind of just touched on title a little bit, just in terms of things that are in title work. But so this piece of it under property related contingency. So title is another contingency, because we're looking for defects and we want our buyer to understand what kind of defects might be attached to the property. So it says, so buyer declines that they choose or decline star title to perform property title search and closing services. Buyer have further agreed to review the commitment given to them within the inspection period stated in the purchase agreement and seek an attorney's advice if there are any concerns. So at the end of the day, you have to order title. That's one of the things that you need to do as their buyer's agent, is to have that title search performed. Choose a title company. Star Title is the title company associated with the company that we work with. And so we have that as a resource and a tool available to us. And so we want to give our clients the opportunity to work with our title company. And then we also want to know that when you receive your title work, like, there are contingencies of time attached to when you receive it and getting it into the hands of your client. They have to have an opportunity to know what's in that title work. And really, Schedule B, Section 2 is the biggest place where we find the defects. It's going to be all the things that need to be cleared from the title in order for this property to close. And if you fail to get this into the hands of your client and there is something there and we get to the closing table, that's where the trouble is going to come in. So the minute you get an accepted offer, order that title on that property. When it comes in, read it, understand it, and get it into the hands of your clients.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Okay, then we go on to home warranties. So every buyer has an opportunity to buy home warranties, and I'm probably guilty of this as well. So, but I'll say this, that if you have two friends, right, you've sold this friend a house and this friend a house, and this friend says, oh, Tracy got me a home warranty. And this friend goes, she never told me about home warranty. I didn't know anything about it. So let's just play fair, right? Offer everyone a home warranty. It's up to them to buy it. In the previous markets, we could get sellers to pay for them. You just wrote it on the purchase agreement, right? Seller just paid it. It's like closing costs. But in this market, it's probably not going to happen. But we want to give the opportunity to the buyer to say yes or no. So just remember to offer a home warranty. Read the home warranty. Understand the home warranty. Know what, there's more than one company out there. I think most people at 5-Star do business with America's preferred home warranty.
Or American
Is it
Home.
the one
AHS also.
Okay. So so there's a couple of different ones. So anyway, lastly, chattel. You probably not a word we really use that much in real estate, but when you took your test as an NTI, you heard a lot about chattel. But chattel,
you're not talking cattle. You're not talking like cattle.
No, we're not talking cows. No,
We don't sell cattle, guys. We don't hold cattle licenses. We don't sell cattle here.
Exactly. We cannot do that. No farm
French
animals.
version chattel, right? It's not.
Yes,
chattel.
exactly. But much like the picture behind my head, that is chattel. It's personal property. So if you want to sell those things, keep them off the purchase agreement. Otherwise, the lender wants to know the cost of that picture, and they want it removed from the purchase agreement, because if it's $25, they don't want you financing the cost of that photo over 30 years.
So this is where it gets really fun too. So let's say you're doing a PA, right? And you're like, hey, your client's like, I really want that pool table. I want that pool table. Gotta have that pool table. So you write the pool table in. I will tell you what I've actually had to do. I have had to scour the United States of America for someone who could give me an appraisal
Yes.
on a pool
On a
table.
pool table.
Yes. Yep.
You know what they basically tell you? Like you call up local billiard company, they're like, we can't even waste our time on that. Maybe it's worth $500, right? Like
Yeah.
they're just sort of chucking numbers at you. And then what I had to do is I ended up having to go onto Craigslist and eBay.
Mhm.
And I had to go print off like all the sales prices of similar models. And I had to furnish that to the lender.
Yep.
I mean, I spent like a full day on this, I think.
Yep. So just don't write it in the purchase agreement, and just don't write it in, because Paul's exactly right. You're going to spend more time to it. Like I just did one where it said it came with a chicken coop, and it was in the listing. Boom! Get a phone call that says either get me a price for a chicken coop or remove it from the purchase agreement. So guess what we did? We just removed it from the. This was just last week. So.
And they happened to forget to bring the coop with them.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So,
I said, I feel like
So,
a used
yeah.
furniture- I said, I feel like a used furniture dealer
I
sometimes.
know. Oh my gosh. I've had spreadsheets with furniture prices on it. Holy cow.
all right. So that covers property related contingencies.
Okay.
Awesome. What else do we got, Kim?
So the last one that we have, well, we have appraisal gap, which is not in here, which Don has rewritten, and I've got it here. It's kind of long, so I'm not going to go through all of it, but just know that that language will be in there. And
Yep, and
basically,
that for everyone who's listening right now, we want to make sure that people are aware of what it means when we say you're going to cover an appraisal gap. Because I think some people are like, yeah, I'll cover the difference, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's not a lot of transparency in what that actually looks like. So this will help further clarify this.
yes, and actually this just happened to me. We had a clear to close on a property earlier in the week. And the home, we gave them 225, it appraised at 220, and we had written up to a $10,000 gap appraisal guarantee. And even though I used the pre-offer addendum, I thought everybody understood it. The buyer texted me and said, so you can't finance that 5,000?
Mm-hmm.
So he was fine with it. They had the money and good for them. They had sold their house high, so they had the cash, but you can never assume. I think sometimes in real estate, we have lingo that we use, right? And so this is in here, basically, I'll summarize it, that the buyer acknowledges that it's possible that the bank appraisal will be less than the agreed upon price of the purchase agreement. Agent may, with the approval of the buyer, stipulate in the purchase agreement any of the options. They might terminate, terminate the contract and seller release the earnest money. Now that you're not going to win with that, right? If we do the termination, that's why. So we're working on this, but, and this was kind of a fast one that we added yesterday. So that is one of the options. You probably want to leave that out. But buyer may offer some amount to fill the gap between the purchase agreement price and the appraisal price up to a maximum amount. Buyer agrees to provide proof of funds at the time to fulfill the stipulation. So then it gives you another third one they can negotiate. So basically, we're just educating you of what the options are. And right now, when you do a gap, I would probably highlight number 2, that you understand that we're going to bring that money. And the other thing I've heard from agents that do accept appraisal guarantee is they've got to close and then they don't have the money. So I recommend showing those proof of funds for not only the pre-approval for the loan, but the money that you've got the cash for the gap, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Good.
All right.
Good.
So that one's covered. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So Doug, the last 2 are the escrow agreement for buyers when they take possession. I'll read it. Maybe you can explain it, but it says buyer chooses or declines to negotiate an escrow agreement with the seller to establish a predetermined amount of money to protect the property in case of damage to anything left, debris, or swapping, taking out appliances that they were supposed to leave.
Well, boy, how often do we have happen that what we agreed to, come closing, come possession, all of a sudden you walk in and there's holes in the walls, there's a whole bunch of debris
There's
that's
an almond color fridge instead of the stainless fridge that was there originally.
That's
Nice.
where I was going. That's where I was going next, because it happened to me last week. That refrigerator that was there was not there when they walked into the house.
Different fridge.
Yeah. So this is and it's really a predetermined amount, right?
Yeah. So when you're setting up the escrow, you would basically, and again, as we've said multiple times during this process, these things might eliminate your buyer from the running as you build these things in, but it's good to have them talked about with your client. That's really what we're talking about, is discussing it. Because what's most likely going to happen here is your client's going to say, well, if we're never going to win a property, we want to put $0 in that that escrow section, because we don't want to lose, we want to win. But at least you're allowing them to make that decision. Okay.
Right.
And we're explaining the pros and the cons. That's really what's happening here, is you're
Yeah.
most likely not going to do a lot of these things, but you're going over it, which makes it your client's decision. That's the key. But the escrow agreement basically looks like this, Doug. I go, well, I'll tell you what, I've been burned a few times in my past. I want them to put $3,000 from their proceeds into an escrow account at the closing table that says that basically, if I get into that house and there's missing appliances, or there's holes in the wall, or they've removed the carpeting that I thought I was buying, but they took the carpeting out and took it with them, I can get some access to cash here to replace those items.
Yep.
Yep. Makes sense. Makes
Yep.
sense.
Yep.
You know, like you just said, and probably in this economy right now, will that happen? Probably not.
Going to be a bit tougher right now, in a market where you have maybe an 8-month supply of houses versus a half a month supply. You probably could get away with that.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now, when I was selling homes mostly in a foreclosure era, when 67% of all closings in West Michigan were foreclosure short sale, we would walk into houses and we would see plumbing missing. I would see copper pipes removed from homes. I would see faces of cabinets taken off. And then once the owner took possession of the home, the previous owners would call and try and sell the faces of the cabinets back to the new owner.
Wow.
Wow.
I saw it where people took a razor blade and they cut 6 inches in from the wall, and they cut the carpeting out and just rolled the carpeting up and stuck it in the lawn because they were so mad at the banks, they were losing their home.
Yeah.
So we went through a lot of these things where we saw, I mean, between the time when they bought the property and the time that it closed, I mean, you could see $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 of damage being done to a house.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
One
so
simple practice that I do is anytime I drop a loop to write an offer, I just go into the MLS and hit print with photos. And then I save a PDF for the active MLS with the photos. So at least I have a starting point. And for
Okay.
time's sake, I won't get into my war stories, but I've had things changed as well. I've had them change the bedrooms because now they added a bedroom in the basement, and now the septic system is too small. So they change it from 5, they have it as 5 so they can sell it. And then now all of a sudden they have to increase that. So they change it back to 4. And so if you just hit PDF, print the MLS with the pictures, at least you have a starting point. It shows exactly what you bought at the time of your offer.
Yep.
So
Yep,
it's some
exactly.
help.
Good, good. So the second part of possession-related contingencies is that daily rate, right? Buyers have been advised to stipulate a large daily rate in case the seller does not give possession as stated in the purchase agreement. So 2 things. One is when you offer a seller possession, right? Are they going to pay a daily rate? We usually call it PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance divided by 30. So if it, they have to pay a certain amount to stay. Again, we keep talking about this market versus other markets. In this market, usually it's being offered at 0.00. We're saying, please pick me. We'll let you stay in your house for 30 or 60 or 90 days for free. But then after that time period, it becomes, if we gave you 30 days for free, but then all of a sudden we're at day 31, 32, 33, and you're still there. We often like to put a higher number there that penalizes them to say, you know what, we gave you 30 for free, but what's the penalty if you don't leave?
But yeah, $400 a day is tough.
Right,
What's
exactly. So if you make it,
number? Yeah.
What's $50 a day is not going to get them out. They don't care. But at the end of the day, right. And we rely on the title company they read the purchase agreement. They can see seller can stay for free, but they can see days after that what the penalty is. Although they wouldn't collect the escrow for it. Honestly, they wouldn't, but nonetheless.
I explain it to people too. If they have to go to a hotel for the night and if they have to find a place to put their stuff for the night, how much
What's the cost of it?
Yeah, that's a lot.
What about animals? Kennels are expensive. Moving trucks, you have to sit on a moving truck. I don't put anything less than $400 a day for sure.
Yep.
And a decent hotel would probably cost you $150.
Now, a couple of comments on that, right? Because we can put these things in here, right?
Yep.
But here's the ugly truth.
Collecting
All these things, you have to try. Collecting this money is tough. And that's where, in a different market, the escrow account can also cover these types of things. So if someone doesn't exit in time, and there's those penalties, now you have a track record of it's $400 a day. So boom, 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 boom. I'm going to grab that from the escrow account now. But in a world, and here's the truth: these contracts, you and I, any broker, The MLS is, we cannot enforce these contracts. The only person or the only organization, the only group of people that can force these contracts is the legal system, the court of law and a judge.
Mhm.
So if someone does stay in the house for 10 days and they rack up $4,000 of overage fees in your home, few things you have to do. One, you have to legally evict them. You cannot have them removed from this house. You have to file eviction because they're now tenants inside your property. So you have to evict them. That takes 30 days. Okay. You have to have the police remove them after 30 days. And if you want to collect that $4,000, you have to take them to court if they won't pay. So this is what's really, really important to tell your clients, guys, because your clients might not understand that. Your clients might think, well, wait a second, you're the broker, talk to their broker, give me the money. I can't get the money for you. You, the buyer, are the one who has to take them to court for that $4,000. So even when you write that $400 in there, you should explain, I just need you to be aware that if this person does stay longer and they're not willing to pay us, it does end up in court.
Right. Which is the unfortunate part about the escrows, you know, and again, the good part is that you're all learning this right now, because eventually this thing's going to get turned on its head, right? And things will go back to, like, sellers are not in charge and buyers in charge. And you know what? We're going to have escrows and things like that, because we used to hold a $2,000 escrow. It covered water, it covered occupancy, it covered all those things. So that when that key exchange form got transferred and it showed, oh, seller saved for $5 at 5 days at $50 a day. Okay. The money was there to cover it, but now we don't win with an escrow. So
right. So Nick Sparks asked the question, and I think we've kind of just answered it, but he said, so how would someone enforce that? That's how you enforce it. You're either you have to explain to your clients they have to go to court. You've got to file an eviction notice if they don't vacate. I'm reading horror stories from people out in California right now who sold their home for like $1 to $2 million. And this person did not leave. They had to get police involved. I mean, there are people, and I've not seen a lot of it locally here, but it's possible. And someone can become a squatter inside of your property, and then you have to force them out legally.
Right, because remember, whether it's 1 day or 30 days, they become a tenant, right? And the other thing is to make sure that the lender will allow someone. I know we're given 30 days. That really scares me. That's a lot of risk for me. But agents and buyers are doing it every day. And so
I don't think FHA offers, you're not allowed to do more than 60 days in FHA.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things we need to really, right now, especially during these times, your lender is so your friend. They are your friend, you know, and so it's really important. They're your best friend. Yep. And the listing agent can be your best friend as well. So
pick a good one. Pick a good one.
Hey, the last part in this is the hold harmless. Anybody who wants to take the hold harmless?
I can take the hold harmless here.
Okay.
Let me pull it up. I don't have the original. I don't know if this has been edited.
Want me to read it, Paul?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Buyer hereby releases 5-Star Real Estate, its employees, agents, and principals from any and all liability arising out of the latent or undiscovered defects after the closing, and will hold them harmless from all loss, damage, and expenses, including attorney fees resulting from inspected or non-inspected material property facts.
Okay, so this basically says, look, guys, we can't see everything, right? I can't take your drywall off and look inside the walls. I can't remove the shingles and take a look at the underlayment. I can't look underneath the soil to see what's happening beneath your house to see if it's going to settle or something like this. There are things we just can't see, either from an inspection or from a non-inspection house. There are limitations to what we can discover in this process. And you're basically saying, we understand that. The buyer is saying, we understand that. We recognize that you don't have a magnifying glass and you can see everything wrong. And we release you from things that are basically unable to be discovered during this 30-day process we're in.
Yeah, good. I like it. And to follow that up, we ask them to sign this at the time they write the purchase agreement, so they have a really good understanding as to what they're signing. They're also going to sign it at closing as part of their closing package from 5-Star Real Estate at the closing. And they're also going to sign a similar document to that at closing from the title company. So they're actually going to see it 3 times.
Well, and then it's not new to them because we've talked about it up front.
Yep, exactly.
You know, guys, I think to summarize this whole thing, because we're nearing the end here, as Tracy just put it, and we've all kind of reiterated, this market will change. And right now, a lot of these things will probably inhibit your buyer from being able to get the transaction. But at some point, Your buyer will be able to load this thing full of protections in here because the market will flip, the market will change, it always does. Like we said, for example, I was just looking at the Grand Rapids market here. We're like 500 houses for about 1 million people. And we've got a couple hundred houses in Kalamazoo, a couple hundred houses in Muskegon area, right? There's very few properties, which means that the sellers are in control. But a few years ago, in the greater Grand Rapids area, we had 18,000 homes on the market at one time.
Yeah.
The market will change, the market will shift, and it's our job to know how to navigate that market. We can't control it, but we're advising our clients, no matter the market that we're in, we're going to show them the ways to success and the ways to win. So we got to be adaptable.
Right.
And things are going to change.
Yep.
Okay.
Beautiful.
We
Beautiful.
always do, right?
Always do. That's our job.
Excellent.
All right, guys.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks everybody. This is good.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.